Recording?
Yep.
This is Oleg and Darren again with episode 6 from the X-Files. Hello, Oleg. Greetings.
Hi, Darren. Thank you very much again for the invitation. It's a great pleasure.
My pleasure as well. We were going to do something a little more fun today. We had started off with the idea of the Bourne movies or the Bourne identity. We'll call it the Bourne Reality. How much in spy movies, or in those, if you want to focus on those, is generally fairly accurate or something well done? I mean, we know it's Hollywood already, so there is an element of untruth to it. And I'm on file generally as being anti-Matt Damon for being an outspoken gun critic when he's made billions of dollars on guns. But hey, digressing, that's a podcast for a different time, I suppose. Where do you want to start and go from there, Oleg? Other than agreeing with me on Matt Damon.
No, I like Bourne movies, and that's all I like about Matt Damon.
Yeah.
Basically. And well, it depends on the consultant work, I guess, in movies. Because I guess in Hollywood it is the same, but when a movie director wants to shoot an action movie about some spycraft or something special operations, they usually call consultants who probably served some time ago in some of the agency or military unit or something like that. And after that, that is what is more interesting here. If this guy accepts the invitation, especially when he is a former FBI or CIA or KGB or anything else, like let us say so, Secret Service guy, he communicates with the service immediately, and then the service and him decide what he can explain and what he cannot.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's basically dependent on the plot of the movie. So the older it is, the more loose were the rules.
Yeah.
So
I would agree with that.
So I can say that modern spy movies are a bit more far from reality than old ones.
They are less far from reality than old ones?
More far from reality.
The new ones are more far from reality.
Yep, just because currently the special services observe the state of things with the movie consultancy a bit closer than before.
That makes sense. One of the things that I'll say on the Bourne movies was when or the Bourne Identity specifically, when it came out, it was something very unique in that it was very visceral. The main character was not a macho tough guy, but a very cerebral, cold, purposeful character. The skill sets that he used were very specialized. The fight scenes were extremely visceral. And those seem to be things that average people that aren't in this industry at all have told me repeatedly, was that it was very visceral, very cerebral, very well thought out. And I would kind of agree with that. I mean, so often spy movies fall into the same Liam Neeson, I will find you, I will kill you kind of mentality where...
Though it is quite a good movie. I know what you...
It is, but the main character
seems... what movie you are talking about.
Yeah, but it's kind of the stereotype
Yeah,
I'm referring to is that the main character is absolutely infallible. You can't hurt him ever. He's indestructible. There's no flaws. And the thing I like about the Bourne movies is that he makes mistakes and he adapts. And he utilizes critical thinking and adaptability and snap decision making and all those things that we've talked about on the fly. Uh, he thinks fast. Um, the thing that, I mean, I've often been told by military people that I know and that I've spent time with or that I've taught, um, they've said that all of his individual skills have some level of authenticity. The thing that's not believable is that nobody's good at everything, and he is good at everything. What are your thoughts on that?
it's basically the general Hollywood stereotype. Probably, well, I don't know what is the reasoning for it, but watching quite a number of movies about different special forces operators or spy agents or intelligence guys, it is the usual cliche that the protagonist is very, very good in a very wide variety of skills.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the closest example is the oh my, I don't remember. I don't remember the English title of the movie.
Who's in it?
Probably, probably The Shooter, about a famous sniper who has been framed in killing and trying to kill a president.
Clint Eastwood?
No, the main the actor is well. Let me check a bit. About Bob Lee Swagger. It's based on a novel, I guess, or something like that.
Oh, okay, okay. The Shooter, yeah, 2007.
Yeah. So here this example is good. Why? Because we see a very professional sniper, a military sniper, actually, a theater of operations sniper,
Mm-hmm.
who feels great in infiltration into the city as a civilian, and moreover, as a person who is chased and stalked by the government. They do
Mm-hmm.
not receive such kind of training.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a military sniper. This guy can choose the advantage point and shoot from there. Then, then run away. That's all.
Yeah.
No infiltration, especially in the city line, in civilian or urban environment. No special hand-to-hand skills that are
Yeah.
basically present in the movies.
Yeah. No, I
So
kind of
I
remember that
think
movie.
that
I'm not.
being good at everything is just a cliche to make a person more interesting for the majority of the viewers, I guess.
Yeah, and I think there's a sort of fantasy that a lot of men especially live out in being the protagonist. So I mean, the more diverse the skill sets of the protagonist, the more uh, the man's fantasy can be fulfilled, at least on screen. So I mean, there's that psychological aspect as well, where you're driving it to the general demographic of people that are going to be watching it, and that's young men predominantly.
Yeah,
Um, a lot of critique, at least from something like the Bourne movies, is on the fight scenes. Um, and me being an old FMA guy, yeah, it's omnipresent that there's an FMA fight choreographer that's doing the scenes.
Jeff Amato,
Um,
basically. He is an FMA guy.
yeah, absolutely, he is. And it's while there is that visceral element, there's still a very stylized element to it. Now, I mean, the one thing I was thinking last night for a little bit on that element, on how I would explain that. Um, so, I mean, like I said, it's very stylistic, but if you have two people that have been trained in inevitably the same style as he and his fellow spies that he encounters and has life and death struggles with are, how do we know it wouldn't look like that? They've both been indoctrinated in exactly the same way. They've been brainwashed in the same way. They've been taught the exact same fighting skills. So, I mean, there's that as well, I guess. But whether it would play out the way that it does, um, I don't know. It's still very stylized violence. It's more gritty than other movies. It's more visceral in terms of our hero gets beat up and injured, and he has to overcome that injury. So I mean, that aspect of it has an element of realism. But I mean, we have to still think that it is still stylized Hollywood violence to a great extent. What do you think?
Of course, and it's basically a known fact that it was not a fighting style that was revolutionary in that franchise, but the
Yep.
manner of shooting the scene, like
Yeah,
different certain angles, certain camera movements, and etc. That was the revolutionary part, not the fight itself.
yeah,
You
and
can
and I think
basically, well, on a lighter note, when using all that tricks with the camera, uh, you can shoot a fight between two drunk grandpas, and it would look like a great Hollywood fighting scene.
yeah, what I liked was the visceral nature more than anything, not the stylization. It's the fight of life and death, and you can see that they're both struggling with it, and it is has that very real element to that aspect of it, not the actual techniques that are utilized. And I find that as the movies go on, once you get to two, three, four, and five, those camera angles and that shooting style becomes almost a distraction. There's so much fast stuff going on that you can't really tell what they're doing, which means that it kind of lacks an
Well,
element of viability. At least for me. I mean, once
I
you've been
was
desensitized to it.
I was once involved in consultation of some TV series regarding
Mhm,
special operation guys,
mhm.
and I know why sometimes they use this kind of shooting.
Continue.
It is easier for actors to learn short sequences of moves, like in fighting, for example.
Mhm.
And this manner of shooting allows them not to learn some long fighting sequences just to shoot the whole scene, but
Mhm.
two or three moves, then camera turned away, then two or three moves again.
Yeah.
So it's easier for actors. Like, for example, in the Rocky movie, the first one with Sylvester Stallone, he and Carl Weathers had to learn uh, long sequences of boxing moves just to shoot that boxing scene.
Yeah. Well, I
And
mean,
and here, well, the effort of the actors is lower a bit. And
yeah.
what are my reprimands towards Bourne movies is that there are too much action, too much direct action in it. Usually, it doesn't happen so.
Yeah, I found after the first one that kind of frenetic filming was a distraction for me. I actually found it quite annoying. I liked the plot of the movie, and the minute the fight scenes came on, I was kind of I don't know. I was waiting for them to end because there was so much camera work and so much flash that I was looking forward to getting back to the spy aspect of it. But I don't know. FMA guys everywhere love those movies. That's like the
Well,
representation of
at
FMA
least the
people, it
movie
seems.
Bourne is better, in my opinion, than the book Bourne.
But then the what?
The book Bourne
What's the
from the
book born?
original novels.
Oh, I haven't even read the novels, to be honest.
You should not.
Okay. No, I haven't been interested in doing so. There are certain elements in that movie, um, uh, in the Bourne movies that I do really like. Um, apart from that, I mean the strategies that he uses, I find very intriguing. I mean, we watched a couple this week, just for fun. Um, some of the elements that I like that a lot of really good spy flicks have. I mean, it's not a unique thing in that regard. Um, if you look at the character himself, his intensity and detachment, like his emotional detachment, and his purpose of mission, make other people very nervous and make mistakes. Um, I find that that's an element that transfers very well to reality. Um, I find the fact that he psychologically always, leading up to every fight scene, uses the element of surprise to gain the upper hand. He never faces an opponent square on or head on. He has some psychological thing that he's done to gain the advantage of time or space or distance in some way. Like in the first movie, the cops in the park, it was a verbal distraction. Um, with the agent that was hunting him in the farmyard, it was the blowing up of the propane tank and shooting of the birds. At the bank, he drops his guard in dejection
Yeah.
as the guard drops his guard as well, thinking that he's under control. Those are some aspects to me that are kind of transferable that most really good spy movies have. And if you pay attention, you notice those. Maybe the average person doesn't know how to articulate it or see it for what it is, but um, in our world or in our kind of profession, those are things that I notice in a movie right away, as I know that you do as well.
What I like in Bourne movie, in the franchise, is that you can clearly see some patterns that Jason Bourne uses. So, of course, when he received his training, he received also some action patterns, what to do in this or that kind of situation. And at least in the first two parts, it is quite clearly seen where he has a protocol and where he is improvising. And it's a good trait of that movies and a good consultation work.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I would agree.
Because that speaking about Matt Damon, he if you pay attention to him during that movies, you can see he even changes his characters' actions and smaller traits like facial expression, even the manner of gestures when he's using protocols and when he's improvising. He
Mm-hmm.
looks very nervous when he has to improvise, as any one
Mm-hmm.
of us, basically.
Yep.
I do not like improvising,
No, but I
and I
mean,
didn't like it when I was at service.
you liked having protocol and something mapped out.
Yep, and
Yeah,
everything was nice and clean.
that makes sense. But like some of the things that he utilizes, like vantage points and apertures where he can see people and can't be seen back. I mean, those are stereotypical things. The talk in the restaurant too. My wife always likes that because he's telling her like, I know that guy at the bar is 215 pounds and can handle himself. I know I can run 5 kilometers flat out without breathing heavy. I know the waitress is left-handed. I mean, that whole detail-oriented thing fits in very well too. And I think they've kind of devised the character really
Agree,
well.
but to my mind, there is too much detail work. Like we discussed before in
Yeah,
the home security, like there is no need in remembering all the car plates.
yeah.
in the parking lot that he did, basically.
Yeah. That's why I didn't mention that. Yeah, no, one of the scenes that stands out that I find really good is in the is it in the first one or the second one? I can't remember if it's the identity or the supremacy one, where he tells her, okay, you go in and here's the protocol. You're going to go into that hotel and you're going to see where the exits are and where they lead. You're going to count the number of people. You're going to spot hidden security cameras and potential security officers. I want you to count how many people are sitting there. And then what I want you to do is I want you to gain the trust of the person. And he goes into this big spiel. And then he calls the lobby phone and she's knocking outside. She goes, oh yeah, I did it already. Like what happened? What went wrong? And she goes, nothing. The guy behind the counter smiled at me, and I thought, I mean, why not just go and ask for the files?
Yeah.
Like, he gave them to you? She said, yeah. I just told him I was his secretary, and I needed to pick up his things because he was gone, and there was no other representative coming. He was like, oh, well, good. And sometimes we tend to, in the industry, overcomplicate things to the point of, complexity, unnecessary complexity. And sometimes the simple solution is the correct one. And I thought that was a really good scene because he's
Yes, I like this moment.
unflawed and implacable until that point.
You are correct. It is a very, painful thing. Complicating things.
But we've all done it. I mean, I know I've done it in public where I've told my wife, okay, here's what needs to be done to find out this information. You're going to do this, this, and this. And she's like, that's ridiculous. I mean, that wastes so much time. She said, you have no idea where you are. I can just go and ask the guy and he will provide that information from me without problem. If just asking him straight on. I was like, oh, well, yeah, you could do that too. I mean, of course, if that works. Yeah, we tend to, I thought that scene was brilliant in a very subtle way in that we've all done that in the industry. We've gone, okay, situational awareness, environmental awareness. What am I looking for? Am I hypervigilant? How's my breathing? And sometimes it pays to just bloody well sit there. And if something comes up and it looks weird to you, take notice. And until then, go about your day. I mean, we've said that on the page and interacting with each other for a long time now. I mean, see the anomalies. Don't look at everything and see how it could potentially stand out. And that's one of those fun things that if you're too detail oriented, you can waste time and effort for something that's much easier accomplished, as is kind of everything in life, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I thought what's that?
No objections.
No. I thought the driving scenes were the best since Ronin. And that's going to be my segue into Ronin.
Yeah, but too much action again.
Yeah, of course.
But it's a
Ronin to me was a
standard
classic
of an action movie to have a car chase.
Yeah, of course. I personally thought, and I know we've talked about this, Ronin was a classic. I talked to so many men who think it was the most boring action movie they've ever seen.
Yep, exactly. It's the most boring as our fucking job.
But it's so realistic, the intricacies and the subtleties. I mean, to me, it was brilliant. I could watch it over and over. But to the average guy that talks to me about it, he's like, it was boring as fuck. And I go, what? Yes. Really? You didn't see all the stuff? And they were like, what stuff? There was no stuff. I mean, geez, there's so many other action movies out there that are far more exciting. I was like, okay, well, I got way more out of that one than I did out of any of the others. But I guess that's just, I don't know. To each his own, I suppose.
It's a masterpiece. I recommend it as a #1 movie. If you want good spy movie film.
Yep. No, I thought it was fantastic. One of the greatest that I've seen over the years, and yet it went totally under the radar, which to me says a lot. The fact that few people watched it, nobody really liked it, and outside of the car chases, it was kind of, given a very lukewarm reception. But if you're somebody who pays attention to those things or has worked within this kind of an industry, there were so many little subtle, intricate things that were fantastic, and showed that there were people that were consulting on the movie that were really paying attention to the details. Um, and yet that stuff is always kind of neglected, you know. Even the Bourne movies were kind of flew under the radar. They were critically acclaimed, but not a ton of people went to watch them. And the ones that did liked the fight scenes, which is the one thing that you and I kind of said was, you know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
people watch things for different reasons and see different things, obviously, from perspective and perception and experience. But I don't know. Ronin to me was one of those movies that really stands out. Like
I
there are a
can
lot of
also
spy movies
recommend
I forget.
a TV
Go,
series,
go for it.
The Americans.
The Americans. I don't think I've
Yep.
even seen that one.
You should. It's a TV series. It's a spy TV series. The action takes place during the Cold War, and the main, well, I can't say they're protagonists. Well, for me they are, but well, it's an American family consisting of Soviet spies.
Mhm.
They are like deeply undercover and etc. And it is a very true to life TV series that shows all that, well, routine and boredom work of a, well, of a spy, and the great difference between James Bond and real intelligence guy.
I'm a Bond fan because when I was a kid,
Oh yeah.
I lived in small town Manitoba, and I had never seen anything before. So the one thing that the Bond movies did was showcase different places in the world and different landscapes and sceneries and cultures, and that was the thing for me. That was the big draw. The movies were fun, but I mean, you didn't if you took them seriously, you're really not focused on
Who is the
you
best
know.
Bond in your opinion?
Oh God, the most fun was Roger Moore, who's panned by everybody.
Yeah.
The best is probably Connery. I mean, if you're going to pick somebody who originated the role, it's pretty hard to beat it when he was the one that set the bar. Um, Pierce Brosnan was okay. The Daniel Craig one puts a different spin on the character. Modernizes the series a little bit, but I think Connery was still the one that really stood out. But I think Roger Moore was really underrated. He added a comedic element to the spy game that hadn't kind of been around since before that. What do you think?
Agreed. Though I like Timothy Dalton as well.
Really? I thought
Yeah.
he was kind of underrated, but he was around for such a short time. I mean, those two movies
Yes,
were.
and he tried to depict more or less realistic secret agent.
Uh, yeah, that one kind of flew under the radar a little bit.
Yeah.
What was the other thing that I was going to say? I think the other end of the spectrum is the Mission Impossible movies, where you look
Oh,
at, if you're looking at real spy stuff and the boring kind of attention to the detail that goes into it, that's the last thing. I mean, they're fun to watch. My wife and I always watch them when they're on TV because they're stupid. You don't have to turn on your brain to watch them. They're just fun action movies, and that's inevitably it.
there
But
is one very important trait that Mission Impossible movies got, and it is very very important, and it is very very good, and no one else ever mm, took this perspective of intelligence and spy work.
Search of
Mission Impossible franchise shows us that a single agent is nothing without a team.
yep, that's true. That's a very good point. I thought you were going to say the Church of Scientology backing it, but I guess I was wrong.
Well, it was just I dislike this franchise. Well, for due to the obvious reasons, but I like this perspective that it is always a team.
Yeah, yeah, that's a valid point. Very well put.
So guys who tried to play secret agents, just keep in mind that it is always the team.
I'd say that's a valid point to add. What about mindset? Do you think that there are a lot of spy movies that really project the mindset of that profession accurately? I mean, I know we know the Bond ones and the Mission Impossible ones don't,
Well, the fact is that the profession could be different.
of course, but the general mentality of a person that's in that line of work to be effective at that line of work, regardless of the diversity of the job itself.
Probably the safe house.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the safe house.
The Safe House. I don't even
Yeah.
think I'm familiar with that movie. You're gonna have to
I
send me
like
a
it.
list after this.
I like
Who's
it.
in the Safe House?
Hmm?
Who's in the Safe House?
Is in the safe house is
Ah, Denzel Washington.
Denzel Washington, but he's not the protagonist. The protagonist is
Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds. Yeah.
Ah, yeah, yeah. I've never known the name for that movie, but I've seen it a number of times. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's another visceral movie as well.
A very good movie. Basically, if we are talking about some state of mind or psychological things, is oh shit, I don't remember the English titles. The Body of Lies, for example,
Hmm.
with with DiCaprio.
I don't think I've seen that one, to be honest. Body of Lies.
It is. It's a very interesting movie. There is not much, actually, no action at all,
I don't mind that though because I'm getting
and
oversaturated on action.
almost no action. It's mind games, of course, strategy,
Ah, yeah, yeah.
and
Russell Crowe's in that one as well, right?
well, what? Sorry.
Russell Crowe's in that one as well, right?
Probably. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember that.
the and DiCaprio and the character of DiCaprio actually shows the routine state of mind of an agent, and some psychological tricks that his own mind could play with him, like falling in love, like addicting to some general civilian things instead of doing his agent job, in, like, well, overusing his connections in the CIA or his agency and etc.
Hmm.
It's a very good movie, I guess.
Yeah, I remember seeing it. I've only seen it once, and it was some time ago. But yeah, I thought that was pretty good too.
So if we are talking about the mindset, I guess the Safe House and Body of Lies are the best.
One thing that I was going to point out was um, we often have talked online
And Ronin,
about,
of course, Ronin. Ronin is the
and of
best
course,
movie in any aspect.
yeah, absolutely, for sure. Even the way they manage themselves in public. I mean,
Yeah,
they're very innocuous, very casual. Um,
all good things
and
come with levels.
that's
Wait,
kind of a good lead into what I was going to put here too. Is that even in the Bourne movies where you see Clive Owen's character and Martin Soka's character, you see that in lots of other movies too. And we've talked about that in real. Killers can be absolutely anybody. We have this stigma and stereotype in our mind of what a killer looks like. He has tattoos, he's ripped, he's been in jail, and killing as a profession. Um, what I like in those kind of elements of those movies is that it portrays a killer being absolutely anybody. I mean, Clive Owen was a piano teacher before he got called to work.
I like this part too.
Martin Sokas was a stand-up businessman that had a house in the burbs. He was well coiffed and well spoken and articulate and friendly with the neighbors. And I think that's a thing that's lost on most people, is that um, stereotypes are just that. People that can fly under the radar as people that are killers, or transferable to people that are spies or people that are professional criminals, you you don't have a look. And that's one thing that I think these movies point out. Ronan is really good at that too, is that you don't look at any of the main characters on that team and think that they could potentially be what they are. Um, and I think that's very easily transferable. I think the standard, he looks like a killer, or I bet that guy's a spy, is inevitably bullshit. It can be absolutely anybody, and it's what happens inside that decides that, not the projected image in public. The projected image in public is there for a reason. It's displayed as something to mislead people into thinking you're not what you are. It's there intentionally. Sometimes that's not the case. I mean, sometimes you see a guy that's killed 12 people and you go, yeah, I could see that. That makes sense from the overview in the local paper or what the media is telling you. But more often than not, I mean, you see that being the case, is people that fly completely under the radar. I mean, even somebody like Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer, or a lot of these people, if you've studied serial killers at all, which I have over the years, they flew totally under the radar. When they were found out, it was somebody that really liked the process, that fit into normal society on an everyday basis. And one would never have known that that was the person that was hidden on the inside.
Agreed. Also, from our Russian realities, probably many people heard the last name Chikatilo.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very famous serial killer in Russia,
Mm-hmm.
and basically, I guess three or four, unfortunately, three or four people has been executed instead of him, just because he was very accurate and below the radar.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I agree,
I
and
think
that's
to be
why
a
watching Bourne movies, I was really upset when that piano teacher was killed by Bourne.
yeah. Yeah.
He was the only one very, very real assassin from all that pack.
But I think the people that are process predators or process professionals. I mean, we always talk about process predators, people that like the process, like serial killers or um, uh, child trafficking rings or serial rapists or people like that. You know, we talk about the negative people like that, the process predators. But there's also process professionals. I mean, and the spy game and the surveillance game and the detail-oriented game and the profile game, those are all process professions. Those are people that uh, do the boring things that are efficient and add up to a very effective uh, finale or result. So there's process professionals as well. And I think that's one of the big things that's lacking in a lot of spy movies, is that the protagonist is not a process professional. He's a resource professional. He's the guy that goes out and fights and takes on the bad guy and beats people up and takes 10 guys at once and knows all kinds of weaponry. And I think that's an element lost uh, that movies like Ronin and Body of Lies brought back, or have reintroduced to the public, that in the spy movie has kind of been lost along the way. I mean, the Bourne movies did it to an extent, but like I said, they kind of went overboard in that he was everything. You know,
I
every
would
kind of
also,
potential skill set he had: explosives, tactics, um, logistics. I mean, there was nothing he didn't do well.
yeah.
Continue.
uh, I just remembered we are as soon as we are talking about the high-level professionals, I would recommend to watch Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy with Gary Oldman.
I still haven't seen it, and it's been on my list for the last year, and I keep forgetting
It's
about it.
It's brilliant.
I've
Almost
heard.
as good as Ronin.
Yeah, that's one
And
that's
even
definitely on my list.
they even resemble each other in some way. It's
And the
about the
premise,
mindset, the high-level professionalism.
Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Yeah, I'm sure I have not yet seen that one yet.
And on a lighter note, spy games.
Oh wow, that's a great cast in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Yeah, great cast, great screenplay, great everything.
Good. I'll put that on my list. What do you think about the process professional idea? I mean, we always talk about boredom and things like that, but the idea of the things that cause other people boredom for me, and obviously for you as well, are not. I find those things to be those intricate little details to be the most fun for me, even if they're boring.
Uh, Basically, I tend to agree about the process professional, but the routines, they play on different strings of our characters, and that's why you could never be 100% process professional at any time.
No, of course not. No, it's
So
not
I
a.
would like to rephrase it like being in the best possible shape for the process.
Mhm.
And shape, I don't mean only some physique, it's also state of mind, the attentiveness and all that qualities, calmness.
I've long used the. I've always stated that online I have no facade. I adhere to the same things that I do in real life. I try and stick as close to the same individual as I am day to day, as I am on social media or interacting online with people. And I've always had kind of a three pillars mentality that go into that. Um, and I think that pertains to a lot of what we're talking about too. Uh, one is patience, two is discipline, and three is self-control. Those are three axioms to me as a person that are extremely important. They're extremely important as a professional or craftsman. They're extremely important as a an online presence. They're extremely important as a person in my community, even if it's in my little personal tribe here. So those are three things that I think a lot of people don't exhibit online. And I think when we're talking about something about all of these protagonists that they're trying to convey to the public, I think those are three traits that generally go into a protagonist in a successful spy flick. I
I would
think
like
they
to
have.
add
Sure.
the fourth one.
Shoot.
Uh, he should be doing things good enough to achieve goals without being perfect in it.
So
It is.
how would you label that?
Oh well, you are the native speaker basically.
Oh, so you're just throwing it at me. Good enough to
I
achieve
will
goals
explain this
without.
kind of stuff. Doing things good enough but not perfect. There is a good example. If you are in the surveillance, you find, for example, you find a good vantage point. Then you take position in that vantage point to observe, and after that, 99%, in the 99% of cases, you will see a better vantage point from there.
Mhm.
So you should not change it for the better.
I think
This
that goes
one you
back
are
to our
currently
concept of.
in is good enough.
But I think from every position that increases in effectiveness, you'll see something that's a 1% chance of being a little bit better from whatever vantage point you are. And I think
Yes,
that goes back to our we
exactly.
talked once about flawed training. I think that's a big thing because so many traditional martial arts have perfect training and are trying to be flawless. And I think, as in life, as in combat, as in training for combat, flawed training is hugely important. You don't develop adaptability um, and critical thinking and decision making at a high level without having flaw in whatever it is that you pursue. There has to be flaw there. And I think that's where a lot of these things fall apart, whether it's martial arts or the spy game or being a professional at anything industry related, is that there's some element of perfection that people are constantly trying to hit. And I don't have that personally. I think flawed training and flawed professionalism and flawed anything is extremely healthy because none of those other really necessary skills at getting good at things come if there's no flaw.
Agreed. And striving for
There's
the perfection is a way to nowhere, because perfection is unreachable.
I like to call it highest percentage. You always
Yep.
get people that come in the door that go, what's the best thing to do against this? And I go, you should rephrase that in terms of what's the highest percentage thing that I can do in this particular context. Um, and the minute you see that flaw in there, you realize that, okay, well, from wherever I end up, it's okay, and I can adapt from there. That's where excellence starts coming from. And that's one of the things that I like that transfers from movies like the Bourne movies and Ronin and the Body of Lies one. The other one you mentioned was Denzel as well. Is that there are flaws, and they go from that point of imperfection and improvise. And that improvisability and that adaptability are huge tools in the toolbox that far too seldom are given in terms of martial arts or combatives or self-defense or personal protection or a professional within the industry. There's always some level of, I mean, how do I word that? Correct protocol. And that's one thing I remember arguing with various people on the page about as well, is that your experiences did you well, but it doesn't mean that they're the correct way to go, because my experiences did me well too, and we're both sitting here conversing about it. So there's always a number of ways to do a thing and do it well. That's a phrase that I've always utilized in this industry. There's always a number of ways to do something and do it well and successfully. Nobody has the market cornered on methodology, not
Yeah.
at all. And the good thing about that is that that means that there's tons of room for adaptability and improvisability. And those are super healthy to develop in people. And that's why I hate so much these people with gimmicks and fast concepts and their thing that makes a ton of money, because that is not the foundation of getting good in this industry. And since I've been yakking about that, I'll let you jump in there before I overload with too much information. What are your thoughts on that?
Basically, again, agree. And I can add nothing because you depicted it quite similar to my own thoughts.
That's why I think in the beginning, you used to tease me sometimes about FMA, because FMA has a certain stigma of being flashy and being complex and being all of these things. And I'm not loyal to a system or a style or an art or an instructor. So, I mean, people can harass me all the time. I don't get excited about that the way a lot of people in the industry do. I mean, you can insult those things all day to me, and you're not going to get a volatile reaction. You'll probably get an agreement with most of it.
Well, I
I'm
usually
adherent
never.
to the way that I've trained and the things that I've gleaned from that training that I find important. I don't care. It could have been anything. I mean, FMA was my vehicle at the time, but it could have been any number of things that fit. So I mean, it's kind of irrelevant in a way. continue? You were going to jump in there. Sorry.
Well, basically, well, FMA is FMA. You can like it, you can dislike it. Basically, well, it's just a manner of dealing with a knife, so, or a stick.
Yeah, and are some
And
ways and methods
well,
that people utilize flawed? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can see it on YouTube. Anybody that's been in a conflict can see a lot of things on YouTube from a lot of different styles that are flawed. So I mean, this goes back to the whole idea of what we started talking about movies. Um, like I said too, I mean, people automatically think, oh, you like the Bourne movies because you've done FMA. And my response is always, I like the Bourne movies in spite of the fact that I did FMA. Most of the FMA in the movie, to me, uh, a byproduct of the movie. It's not something that I'm enamored with from the movie. I've seen lots of movies where Jeff Imada choreographs fight scenes and uh, whatever. It's a lot of the other elements in the movie that for me are thrilling. Least of all the fight scenes. I could really care less about stylistic representation in the midst of something far greater. Uh, that's one thing I liked about Ronin was that there was no style, there was no martial arts thing that was promoted in the midst of it. It was just a spy flick, and it focused on simply that element. And the violence in that movie was extremely basic and probably far more realistic in terms of actual violence than most of these other stylistic movies that have some fight coordinator representing it.
yes, of course, because fight coordinator should also earn money to buy his bread.
Yeah, sure.
And talking about questions, I receive, in my case, it's a bit different. People usually say that, oh, you probably like secret agent movies because you were an agent. I usually reply, no, that's why I hate secret agent movies.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to me, I mean, um, systemic fight thing in the midst of a really good spy flick distracts from the actual plot of the movie generally. And I don't mean that to insult any style, whether it's Krav Maga or uh, what's the one in Jack Reacher that they have, the elbow. What are the defense lab or I don't know. So
It's
many
Casey,
different branches,
I
right?
guess it's
Kesey, KFM, yeah,
yes,
that's the one.
KFM, yeah.
I mean, those are put into a movie, and you know, people cling to those. Like, oh yeah, we were in the Batman movies, and well, that's great. I mean, it fight scenes for me, being a martial artist, are kind of a blasé thing at this point. There's so many fight scenes out there, and so much stylism, and so much representation of method that I've ceased caring. I mean, I will never like a movie because it has great fights. Um, that's just not an element for me watching a spy movie that's particularly important. I don't care about it. If you want to mock the fight scenes in the Bourne movies, feel free. I mean, I'll probably join you, and it's just not an element I care about particularly much. Um, I'm not stylistically loyal that way. Um, I know you're not either. I mean,
Yeah.
people ask me all the time, like, what is Oleg training? And I go, what does it matter? He knows his stuff, and he's very clear in articulating that stuff, and he has a ton of experience. Does it really matter? Did you want to go get your black belt from him? Well, no. Well, I mean, not exactly. I mean, well, not exactly how. If you want to know if I would recommend Oleg as a hand-to-hand combat or weapons instructor for you, I would. That should be enough. I don't see what styles particularly does he train in as being a particularly relevant question any longer. At least not at this point.
Mm,
Digressing.
I thank you, thank you for kind words, and that reminds me again, and I always remember the old proverb about the high mountains. high mountain with different paths, but the same one top point.
Yep, yep, I would agree with that.
To some extent, when it goes to the reality, when you have a certain level in any of martial arts, basically it stops being a matter of what style you are practicing.
Yeah, I mean, I find it almost impossible to play not as a hybrid. You know what I mean? Like I'm not a purist. I don't play with somebody and go, okay, well, today I'm not going to use clinching and grappling.
All pure
Tomorrow
styles once
I'm not
appear.
going to I'm not going to pull my knife tomorrow. I mean, today I'm going to stay away from the eyes and face raking and things like that. I mean, it's an accumulation of knowledge at that point, which is what spy games should take to. I mean, people that have been in the game for a long time aren't stylistically representative. And to me, that's one thing I hate is that they're, of course, like you said, I mean, fight coordinators have to make their money too, and they deserve food on the table. I get it. But I mean, I just have ceased believing in stylistic violence. I mean, it's just not something that I pay much attention to anymore. Um, there are going to be things present um, that are unaccounted for. And if you and I are grappling, for me to be, let's say you're using your military sambo for me to go, okay, I'm just going to stick to my Filipino grappling today. I refuse to delve into my shoot wrestling and sambo background to fight Oleg. I mean, that's such a stupid statement. I mean, nobody's a purist anymore. Everybody's a hybrid.
You know,
Fighting is purely fighting is purely fighting. I mean, if you fight, you fight. It's not fighting like an FMA guy. It's not fighting like a Salat guy. It's not fighting like I mean, people still stick to that. Oh, I fight like a karate guy. And I mean, what do you think on that? I think those are such irrelevant arguments anymore. They're such a waste of
well,
time.
I agree again, and you just reminded me some funny stuff uh, about the styles that I used. Is like I refuse to use this because I'm sticking to that. Sometimes when I teach civilians, uh, I can mm, well I give them some sort of curriculum, and sometimes when I show something or just have a friendly sparring with some of my students, sometimes I use this or that technique that are not and never will be in their curriculum, just
Yep.
because, well, I know that they could feel good without
Mm-hmm.
these techniques. And they ask, well, when will we start learning this stuff from you? I would say never. Why? Because, well, guys, what you are studying. The answer is, for example, well, combat sambo. So this is Manjan Quen. It's not in the curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, people get far too. I don't know. I still see that daily on the internet. People arguing over style and things like that. I mean, I guess we're getting off topic because
Yep.
that's a topic for me that
It's not
I
movies.
it's not progressive in any way, and nor will it be.
Though I can say a couple of words. I just recalled one good movie. I probably mentioned it before. It is called The Spy Game.
Yep.
It's not very serious, but it is just fun, and it shows the potentially perfect high level of the secret agent thinking.
Is that the one with Robert Redford?
Yeah,
Ah, okay. I haven't
when
seen
he
that one
tries to
forever.
save his trainee, without having a permission to. So he leads a spy game against his own agency
How
and
often do you
being
think that
inside
happens?
the agency.
How often do you think that happens, where agents work unilaterally?
Mm, if we are talking about the movie, then I guess it happens it's a very rare case.
Yeah.
Though, if you are a high level agent, for example, if you are some division commander or some squad commander or department leading officer, you have, and I know it for sure, that you have certain opportunities to make your life easier.
Hmm.
And I think that those guys use such opportunities.
I think people swerve from the path and kind of. I mean, if it would seem to me there would be a certain level of adaptability and improvisation that goes into the actual career itself. I mean, even if it's generally boring or detailed, there's a certain amount of that element that's present. Now, how far it goes, I mean, that remains to be seen. I think there's some, at least in North America, I think there's some I mean, I don't want to call it indoctrination. That's such an evil word, but um, there's some soft wiring going on that looks for people that are going to be very loyal to the system and loyal to the government and go from there. And I think that's one element. The whole rogue Mission Impossible kind of thing seems kind of stretched. That whole groups within an agency work unilaterally against that agency to, I mean, that seems to me somewhat far-fetched these days. I mean,
You know what? Can you guess the perfect KGB low-level agent portrait from 70s till the collapse, till the 90s?
who or what?
A guy from a countryside.
I could believe that.
They tended to recruit countryside guys from small villages because they are straightforward, they are loyal, and they basically do not ask questions.
I think that
And
comes from
the
simple
major
living, doesn't
trait
it?
was they got used to routine work, like in the village something.
Hmm.
So they just do what they are told to do, and never ask questions, never express their opinion. Perfect soldier.
Yep. But simple living, uh, lots of repetition throughout the day. Very likely, I mean, if you're doing a quick profile, very likely minimal education, or they wouldn't be living in a small rural village. Limited scope on global thinking. Um, like we said, minimal education. Uh, Likely lower middle class to low class. Um, not a lot of disposable income. I mean, how am I doing? That would seem to be something that also fits with that profile of being a soldier that listens to directions and doesn't free think a lot.
So that soft wiring is, I guess it is a common case.
I, yeah, a pretty smooth one.
And by the way, this is also partially depicted in Body of Lies.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think what you want in somebody like that would be somebody who can think on the fly and has a certain level of intellect, but somebody who's not going to think too thoroughly on the grand scheme of things.
These guys, talking frankly from my personal experience, such guys that you described, uh, they have a very they have rather a quick career. So they are field agents for quite a short amount of time. Then they
Mhm.
go upper on the ladder, like department leading officers, some squad leading officers, coordinators, and etc.
That would make sense. But all the way up the chain, they're still adherent to command.
Yes, of course.
The profile remains regardless as you're going through the ranks because that profile seems to
For
be
example,
fairly consistent,
without boasting,
restricted.
if we are talking about me, I've been a field agent for a year and a half only.
Mhm.
After that, I was shifted to another position, a higher one.
Mhm.
So, yep, if you are a quick learner, quick thinker, if you have good clear thinking, you can see the whole picture. You will not be a field agent forever.
No,
Field agent is the guy who is doing what he's told to do.
yeah, no, that makes sense. I always get told very um, very opposite things regarding military. I get told that from a lot of people that I would fit into the military very well, and then I get told by other people that I would absolutely suck and get thrown out of the military. And I'm never quite sure whether those are complimentary or derogatory. So um, it's comical in some ways, and I'm not quite sure why there's such a diverse view of. Um,
Good thinkers are good at war, and good thinkers are liked during wartime and are greatly disliked in the military during peacetime.
yeah, yeah, maybe that's the case partially. I don't know. I just like I find to me, and I mean this is kind of a byproduct of what we're talking about with spy movies. Um, I find that when I'm very anxious or stressed or tense during my day, one of the weirdest things calms me down is a war movie, like a movie on World War One or World War Two, and I find I feel very at home in those movies. And it's not a macho thing, but the idea um, of that kind of battle of attrition calms me down for some reason. Like Band of Brothers, I remember when Band of Brothers came out, I was smitten. That was probably about what, 12 or 13 years ago already. We're kind of expanding our topic here, I realize. I really like old war movies. They're simple, the tactics are easily implementable, and the element of attrition that went into those two wars and the strategy behind it to me is exceptionally intriguing. And it takes my mind off my regular day.
Also agree. And even the spycraft of those days was kind of essential, like no unnecessary details and a very short amount of what is really necessary in the job.
But there are so many good war movies from World War One and Two that have that spy element to them. That like you just said, I mean that have it factored into the story. And I mean, so often we see a movie like Saving Private Ryan where it's visceral, it's a wonderful movie, but it's the fighting aspect of it. And there were so many things that went on behind the scenes in those two wars that get neglected. That when you finally have a really good World War One or World War Two spy movie, um, it really enlightens you on how so many things were happening then that people kind of don't acknowledge or that fly under the radar. Um, you know, kind of the war within the war. I can't remember the movie, but the Benedict Cumberbatch one where they what was the movie? It was just a little while ago where he's trying to configure the the Nazi spy codes.
Oh, I remember something like this.
What was the name of that movie? Let me try and find it. The Imitation Game.
Yeah.
Um, those kind of movies really intrigue me. Even The Hunt for Red October, something like that people generally seem to find very boring. I didn't. I found that there was a lot of really important stuff that went on there. That kind of was underneath the radar, but that's why I think that's another element of those World War I and World War II movies that I really like. That was where my interest in the spy movie kind of originated from. I mean, obviously the first thing was the Bond movies, but as you get older and more mature, you look for a little bit more challenging input. And I think a lot of that came from those original movies. And that's one of those examples. Enemy at the Gates was another one that really exemplified the propaganda between Russia and Germany during World War II.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that one. That was
Yeah.
another one that had a lot of things going on within the movie that wasn't just about the fighting and killing. Even the strategy between the two snipers was intriguing, far more so than the actual war part itself, where bodies were going against bodies. So, anyways, just another add-on there. There was another one on World War II regarding codes that the Native Americans were deciphering a lot of Nazi and Japanese codes
I know
as well.
this part.
And I don't know. I mean, the idea of the movie was great. The movie itself was somewhat restricted because Nicolas Cage happened to be in it, but generally the idea was sound. I'm gonna have to cut it short, Oleg, because we actually have somebody here at the gate.
Okay. All right.
My
Take care then.
apologies.
Thank you very much.
You as well. And my apologies sincerely for having to cut it so short, so quick.
No, no problem.
All right.
The guests
We'll,
are always the guests. Thank you very much.
Oh, they are. Thanks, Oleg. I appreciate your input on this. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you. Bye. See ya.
Bye.